Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ida Pearl-Lee with the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and this is our CannaCast. We're coming back from the summer. And today I have with me Lewis Johnson from Apothecare. How are you, Lewis?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. How's your summer going so far?
Pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Including some MiCIA events that we were involved with.
I know. The last time I saw you was at our summer annual.
It was amazing.
Yes.
That's just like always. A lot of fun, and it's really good to be able to just get together with the participants in the industry to get other perspectives and all that networking that you all provide. And it's, we all appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We love, you coming up there. So you kind of played, you were double fisting it a little bit. You were coming as Apothecare, and then you also came and sang for some of our events.
Yeah, well, so ever since we kind of met that way and stuff. It's one of the things that we do. College in Michigan, and I also attended law school here at University of Michigan.
Okay.
So I'm a lawyer by training. Most of my career was spent in also apartment projects, that type of thing. So that was, although I practiced some law, and of course. So when I was in high school, I was in Brazil for an extended period. And then during college, I spent a fair amount of time in Europe. Also traveling with music as well. So I've traveled in Europe and South America. And then I spent a lot of time in Japan.
Wow.
As well. And so
Quite an eclectic.
Yeah, it's
Travels,
one of those things. I speak some languages and so forth, and so I was really figuring that I would end up doing something on an international basis. And when I got out of law school, I was traveling a lot back and forth to Japan, and then opportunity just kind of came available in Ann Arbor. I did, as a kid, I had a lot of exposure to building. My dad and my uncles were in the building business, but I never worked on a framing crew or anything like that.
Right.
They had some kind of knowledge about it. Again, life is kind of what happens while you're making other plans.
Oh, yes.
And so it just ended up in Pittsfield Township, and we developed a subdivision. One thing led to the other, and so yeah.
Okay.
It's been quite a ride, but almost all of our businesses in Michigan.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so love Michigan very much, and a lot of people hate the winter.
Well,
I like the bugs getting killed. I like the seasons.
Yeah.
I particularly like fall in Michigan.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just figuring out how to make Michigan work for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
we can
Well,
go to Florida.
And I'll tell you this too, and whether it's Florida or California or Nevada, all these places, just a basic thing is water.
Yes.
And
right.
And I think we're starting to see that moving into the desert by the millions and doing all these things is really not very smart. And I think that way, people came to Michigan, and the very first people who were here before Europeans got here and so forth. Michigan is a very good place because it's got so much water.
Yes, yes, yeah.
And I agree. It's kind of a good idea too to kill off the bugs so you don't eat your wood buildings.
Right. So do you have a personal cannabis story?
I guess only to the extent that weed has been part of my life from the time I was a teenager. And I've always enjoyed it. I guess you could say used cannabis in a way that has been helpful for me.
Mhm.
And as best I can tell, it hasn't hurt me in any way.
Right.
And so, other than that, other than I suppose just, being in music as well, cannabis use with jazz musicians goes back a long ways. And so it's not every jazz musician who smokes weed, but,
Yeah, well,
lots
it's
of
in a lot of
musicians
different industries.
and all kinds of
Yes.
different people do, and so forth. I think the thing also, just in general, and with people with addictive personalities, and I may have some addictive aspects or OCD aspects. I would say anybody who's a serious musician probably has that, because you're willing to sit in a practice room for hours and hours by yourself and go over this kind of mechanical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in my case, I've often wanted to drink or take up a little bit of drinking, because red wine and the advantages of red wine, I've read about it. But I don't really enjoy alcohol that much, and just in my case, cannabis never led me anywhere else. I never had any desire to do other drugs or things like that.
Right.
So it's been a copacetic thing for me. I just sent you, actually, I texted you this business about COVID and people's resistance to COVID. I've never had COVID. I'm also,
Congratulations.
I'm very committed
Yes.
to hot yoga. I've done that for about 5 years. When COVID first broke, the hot yoga was just not available.
Right, no.
But other than that, I attribute my lack of COVID to weed and yoga. So,
I hear you.
yeah.
I second that one, absolutely.
And then my other story, I would say, is that just going into this, I'm not a ganjier, I'm not an expert in strainology or anything. I'm kind of a quick study, and now after 4 or 5 years, I've learned an awful lot. But our initial entry into this was very much centered on organics.
Mm.
And our first crop came out 2 years ago in June.
Wow.
And I had smoked a fair amount of weed, including some weed from dispensaries in Ann Arbor that were available before licensing and so forth. But we're a little after licensing, but not too far back. And when that first crop came out, and we had a strain, Sunday Driver that we produced, and actually that was our second harvest. We put that into an organic cannabis cup competition, which we won. And when I smoked that first weed that we made, it was the best weed that I had ever smoked.
That's
So that was very
Yeah.
terribly exciting. And I told our grower at that time, I said, well, Josh, I don't know how we're going to do or how this is going to go, but I'm telling you, this is damn good weed.
That's awesome.
So personally, I'm happy about that.
Yeah,
We've been able to get
yeah.
into it in such a way that we've really, I think, created products that are a flower that is different than what most
Right.
people are producing.
Okay, so let's address just a little bit, how did you get into actually opening a dispensary?
Sure.
What led up to that?
Sure. And so, as we said, we're in the real estate business.
And where is your dispensary?
And it's on Plymouth Road,
Yes.
2793 Plymouth Road. And if you're familiar with the Plymouth Road Mall, we have Starbucks, the Dearborn Credit Union. Apothecare.
You're in a good location.
Right. Yeah. So we are in a very safe and secure place, and it's And so anyway, I have a partner, Jack Edelstein, who I've known for years and years.
Hey, Jack.
And Jack, among other things, has a master's degree in urban planning.
Oh,
And,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
he has a PhD in organizational behavior and a master's degree in urban planning, both from Michigan.
Okay.
And so the city of Ann Arbor, gosh, is 15 years ago or so, I kind of had an epiphany or changed their policy and saw that, geez, we have a lot of big parking lots that, you know, don't have people in them and so forth and so on. And they wanted to, you know, attract investment in the city, and so changed their policy and allowed increased density. And so Jack knew my other partner, Vern Hutton. Vern is now, I think, 93 or so, and was in those days, Vern Hutton was with Bechtel and was the lead engineer for many of the scientific experiments that they ran on the first Apollo mission to the moon.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah, so
that's exciting.
Just amazing. And Bechtel was a big engineering company in Ann Arbor. And so
Wow.
one day I asked Vern, I said, geez, Vern, I mean, you know, I'm in the real estate business, I can understand, but why would you leave something so exciting? So he said, I just couldn't stand the bureaucracy. So anyway, you know, we then went to the city and we ended up building this building on Plymouth Road. And as I said, we had Starbucks and Dearborn Credit Union as our anchor tenants.
So you actually built your building?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what we do. We're in the real estate and construction business. And mainly, you know, residential, but in this case is a commercial building.
Nice.
And one day we had a guy show up. He started talking about weed. You know, and Jack met with him. And we went up and had a meeting with Denise Policella, the attorney out of Brighton. And Denise sounded like it was going to take a month of Sundays to get this law passed and so forth and so on. So we made an arrangement with this guy. We thought that he would, you know, just on a month-to-month basis, we kind of see what happened. Next thing you know, I went over there and he was selling weed. So Ann Arbor had opened up before the state licensing was available. And at one point, Jack called me up and said, hey, we got a problem.
Wow.
And so the way our HVAC system, you know, the air conditioning system works, we have a rooftop unit there above this little suite, which is 200 square feet that we leased out to this guy at the beginning. And there's a little access to the roof. So that feeds the Dearborn Credit Union.
Oh.
And so Jack calls up and says, we got a problem. We got odor in the Dearborn Credit Union.
Oh, no.
And so we go over and meet with our tenants and say, look, you're going to have to go, you know. And then he said to me, what if we gave you the same rent as the Dearborn Credit Union? And I just started laughing. And then he told me the dollar volume of sales that he was doing out of the 200 square feet.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm not a weed guy, but I'm a real estate guy.
Right.
And when he told me that, I kind of said, oh.
Wait a minute. Light bulb went off.
Exactly. It turns out the retail sales per square foot. Oh, geez, we better take a look at this. We actually tried to do something with him that didn't work out. But yeah. One thing led to another, and then also the way the licensing works in the city of Ann Arbor, at least, is that there is a special use permit that runs with the real estate.
Okay.
And as in most communities, there are rules about distance from a church, distance from another building, all of those type of things. And so, yeah, we got the license for the building, and kind of one thing led to another.
Everything happens for a reason. That's so cool.
And then just right from the get-go, and I guess rightly or wrongly, it just seemed to me that we had to have our own source of supply.
Right.
And things in those days were much different. And even though it seems like those days are like, geez, 24 months ago,
Right.
ancient history, but things have changed tremendously
They have.
in a short period of time. And the other insight we had is we looked around and we did understand hydroponics. And we saw that the whole market and the way that weed was being grown was almost exclusively hydroponically, with a rock wool medium or cocoa or something like that. And Jack and I just in general, are into sustainability and into organics. And so this is kind of some degree of personal value. I'm not saying that we are trying to impose our values on
Right,
our
right.
business, but rather to say, gosh, you know, of all this market and all these people, some, at least a small number, will be interested in organics. And so what if, unlike everybody else, we take a different path and we go into the organic space? And,
What led you to want to go into the organic space?
well, like I say, it's pretty much a business calculation
Right,
that just everybody else
okay.
would be going into hydroponics. And then we're hardly farmers or anything like that, but at least we're interested in these things.
Right.
And about these days, about 7% of food in the United States is organic.
Yes.
And so that 7% doesn't seem like
It's
much,
not a lot.
but it's about 700% more than it was 20 years ago.
Right.
And the main thing, there are many differences between organically grown flowers and vegetables and so forth. But first and foremost is pesticides. And with almost all food, there's residual pesticides on food.
Right.
Tangerines about 90%. So much of the food is that way. And then just the simple kind of common sense of it is it's bad enough to eat pesticides. Smoking pesticides sounds really bad.
Yeah, that does. Now that, yeah, right.
So that was kind of the vision. And then we found a grower in Washington State called Gold Leaf Gardens. And Washington has been up and running for a long time relative to Michigan, one of the first states to get licensed. And they've had a successful business there with a certain way of growing that for indoor cultivation is really unique. And we actually bought standard procedures from them and took those procedures and we, modified and adapted them, but we largely adapted that type of system.
Okay.
And as far as I know, we're the only one in the state that is running the system. There are some other certified organic growers. One is an indoor grower. The others are all either greenhouse or outdoor.
How hard is it to get an organic certification? Because that's quite a rigorous certification you need to go through, correct?
It's an interesting way to put the question, but I would say if you're doing the right things, it's not hard at all. I mean, in the sense that
Right.
and the main things are you're not using pesticides, chemical pesticides, and you're not using salt-based or chemical fertilizers.
Right.
So that part is simple enough. Proving that you're not doing it with a complete document review and the full, if you will, the full orifice examination at the facility level. Of course, most people are not trying to do that.
Right.
So,
well, because I'm sure there's an extra cost.
well, sure, and so and to be clear, we are certified by a group called Certified Kind.
Okay.
And they're out of Washington State. They do organic certification also for USDA. And the process is the same, but we can't have USDA certification because it's not legal at a federal level.
Correct.
But they do all the same things, and this subgroup is headed up by a guy named Andrew Black. And we became involved with Andrew right from the get-go as well, because we knew that people say all kinds of things, and especially in the weed business. People can say anything, but what can you prove?
Right.
And so we thought that it wasn't good enough that we were organic, but that also we needed to have the third-party certification so the public and the customers can rely on the fact that we're not just saying we do these things, we can actually prove that.
Which is super important.
So again, all these things, we do believe in these things, but it has been a business strategy for us. And our baseline assumption is that in 100% of the market, we don't need 100%, we don't need 10%, we don't 5%. We need a very small group of customers who agree with us that this is just better for you, it's a better way of doing it, it's more copacetic in some cases with your own lifestyle, things you believe in.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the thing. So when people, start to use cannabis, the majority of people have exhausted all, medical measures. They're coming off of pharmaceuticals. They're looking for a better quality of life. And it sounds, like you're giving that to your patients. You're providing them with clean medicine, and you have the documentation, and you're proving to them, you're in charge of your health, and here we're providing you with this medicine as well.
At least an option.
Yeah, I think that's really
an option that is not very common or not that available. And again, I want to emphasize that the reason that so far we've been successful, we figure I don't know what it is, but it's over $10 million. It's a big number. The amount of weed that we've sold in the last couple of years. And people have different reasons for using cannabis. And it begs the question even as to what medicine really is, right? And so maybe in my case, I don't have a medical condition. In fact, in part, I kind of feel like it's not just COVID, but everything else that somehow, between, not eating meat and doing the yoga, doing the organic cannabis and so forth, I've been very fortunate to not have health problems, but maybe just allowing you to chill out and sleep better or feel euphoric at a certain time during the day. Is that medicine?
It can take away your pain.
So anyway, I think it is fair to say that the vast majority of our customers are habitual users who use weed for whatever reason.
Well, and we all use it individually. Yeah.
So, and then some subcategory of those people have serious underlying medical conditions. We think that weed can be helpful for people in general, and that where do you draw the line between recreational use and medical use? But also we do seriously feel that in certain cases, and this has been demonstrated, right? The FDA itself has approved cannabis for childhood seizure disorders and for glaucoma. So they themselves, and it's so frustrating, of course, for us,
Right.
the hypocrisy of it. And then when you see them licensing all these dangerous, highly toxic drugs, and then they have cannabis, which has no toxicity at all. It's never killed anybody. 0 ODs from cannabis, but that's a Schedule I drug.
I know.
So this is a struggle, and then we both know Ryan Basor very well and so forth, and it's led to other problems, criminalizing the society. So, anyway, suffice it to say, there's a lot of reasons that people, use cannabis, and we are starting to see, finally, we got a chance to prove that in some cases, cannabis can go right after specific conditions. So we've just started working with a medical doctor who's a specialist in epilepsy. And he has developed a platform, maybe not super sophisticated, but the first platform that we've seen for actually tracking symptoms and matching then molecules and symptoms. So epilepsy patient with tremors, let's see, let's look at dosing, and let's see how 2.5 milligrams of THC and 10 milligrams of CBD up to 500 milligrams of CBD, or what is the right mix for that person. And then with all the recent,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where's the study being done, or how?
So that company is being done at Apothecare.
Okay.
And so they are involved. It's Sativa Sciences is the name of their company. They're active also in Canada and just recently in Thailand. Thailand has legalized medical marijuana. In Canada, I understand, now has Blue Cross reimbursement.
Do they really?
So anyway,
Good job, Canada.
so they're in process
Right.
of trying to get serious about this. I mean, they feel that there's just a tremendous number of serious medical
Right.
people who could use cannabis beneficially, but, you know, just even starting out, if you go to the doctor, the normal question to start would be, well, what other medications are you taking?
Yeah.
And that question might not even come up in your interview for your medical card or whatever.
Right.
So the whole point is trying to actually document things and look at what is the impact on symptoms as we apply different doses and we track it. And then we also track the other things. So if, we are giving the patient, whether it's flour, it is easier to track molecules with edibles and tinctures and so forth. And we also certainly, most people don't know what terpenes are, right? Just in general, the general public.
We're just learning what cannabinoids are.
Right, and terpenes are really complicated because they're complex molecules and so forth, and the way clinical studies are done, it's really important that you isolate a molecule. So then you can say, okay, this molecule, this symptom, and then you can kind of compare doses and results and things like that. And so anyway, needless to say, this is just starting out.
It is, it really is.
So
yeah, and we're just learning.
we know about this much and we don't know about that much, and that has all to do, of course, with cannabis being illegal and not being able to do studies and so forth.
Right.
Israel is way ahead. Other countries are ahead of us with this research, but this is part of our mission, part of what we're doing. And so we are very committed to medical. We do believe whether you call it, it just makes me feel better, it makes me cope, or we're actually dealing with epilepsy or cancer or serious chronic pain,
right,
or other things like that. So we look down the road and we see that as time goes on, we'll get more specific about the way that it works and the way that we can benefit patients or customers or however. And sometimes we struggle with, well, what are we patients or are we customers or,
right.
But we are trying to figure it out. And then deep down, we can prove that we don't use chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizers. We can't prove that our terpenes are thicker or better.
Right.
We can't necessarily prove that our weed doesn't hurt your throat or something like that. But as time goes on, we hope that we'll be able to know more and more about this.
Yeah.
And we'll focus more and more on terpenes. And I would say just in general, where we're at in Michigan is a little bit behind other states, that have had more extensive experience. It's kind of similar when you talk about the group that would embrace organics, right? It's not 100%, it's not even 10%, but it's kind of the same idea. You will have some category of cannabis users who will be serious, geeky people, very concerned about what they put in their body. And as time goes on, we'll find out more about terpenes and exactly how they work, and you'll be able to increasingly dial in the experience that you want or the condition that you're trying to ameliorate.
Exactly.
But we just have a long way to go. I think that, and for all cannabis businesses, this is a real challenge because you have to take the people as they come, and you have to, we geek out on this every day, right? And we're like neck deep in all these things, but
the average person,
even if they use cannabis a lot,
they
they just don't know those things. So we think about that all the time too. How do you take this very complicated message that we're really just finding out about, and then make it simple enough that the bud tender can convey that information to a customer in the 2 or 3 minutes that they have to spend. So while we're doing all these things, there are unique business challenges, right? And one thing, just to digress back, one thing I would say if you were just an entrepreneur, and that was your identity, and you were given, a list of potential assignments that you could get into,
Mhm.
it's hard to imagine one more complicated than this, or a tougher slog
Yes.
for the entrepreneur to see all of these things
There's
coming
so
that
many
you can't
moving parts.
anticipate,
Yeah.
and then the state changing its mind or changing the rules on the fly,
Mhm.
the way the testing system works or doesn't work, all of these
Yeah.
vagaries, and then of course the price going up and down, and the customers themselves, really, it's all brand new. There's lots of shiny objects all over the place, and so there's the whole business is kind of characterized by transactionality,
Mhm.
I would say, and so we're in this process of both.
Right.
The cannabis companies and the customers figuring it out, figuring out what they really want, where we're gonna be.
Yeah. It's definitely a new frontier, I mean, we're all in a new space, we're all kind of, figuring out where we belong and.
And then needless to say, certainly, and then, I've heard people say two things like, well, I just want to be rich. It's like, well, okay, I guess we all want to be rich. Maybe that's a good idea. But there's different ways. Okay, well, I'll buy a lotto ticket. Maybe I'll get rich that way.
Right.
But the other thing that we kind of believe deep down, in my experience has been with everything else we've done, is that in order to be successful in business, you have to provide something that is of real value.
Right.
And so there has to be a so-called value proposition. So we have to figure out how to deliver a high-quality product for a reasonable cost, just like any other business. But it's just the Wild West in terms of brands and products, let alone all these complicated things we're talking about,
Right.
chemistry.
Right. Now, you said too that you're more focused on the medical aspect of cannabis, and what are you doing to help with that?
Well,
because I know you.
Just to be very clear, we are on the retail side as well. In general, in Michigan right now, and you announced this or the speaker from the state announced this. I think that we got last month 200 million or so in sales, and about 20 million were medical.
Mm-hmm.
So we have about 10% of the business now that is being done through the medical side.
Okay.
In our own retail store, in addition to that 10%, which we typically get, we may have 5% of people, or we may have some products that we don't offer on the med side, that are only on the rec side. They might make up another 5%. Well, 15% is not a small deal.
Right.
First, that's very important. And again, the way the market is right now, including our market, the major users are habitual users who are not necessarily using cannabis for specific medical conditions. What we're saying is that, well, the med cards are going down. Many companies don't renew their med license. They don't offer a med menu even,
Right.
let alone getting involved with medical doctors and trying to really dive deep into cannabinoids and specific conditions and so forth. So to kind of try to summarize that, in the near term, medical, the way that most people talk about it, is not terribly important. And most businesses, and arguably even the state itself, the state just changed the one rule about edibles that gave the medical patient a small advantage, that they could buy twice as much THC in one package.
Right.
And then now the state has changed that, so not even that. So what we're down to is, you get a medical card, it does save you 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the ads on TV seem to be by Geico. They're always talking about hundreds of dollars of savings. And if you're a habitual user, you could save thousands of dollars,
You could.
with the 10%. But as time goes on, we're not going to go away from medical.
Right.
We'll always have a medical menu, and we don't know what the future is, but we're going to keep going in this direction. We're gonna
And you're working
continue.
with NUG MD too?
Yes, and so NUG is a company out of California, and they've been around maybe for 4 or 5 years. They are known as a subscription service.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
they actually they have a technique for curating a box, and we're gonna be involved in that. But then they have an aspect of their business called NUG MD as well, which is pretty much an outreach for getting medical cards.
Okay,
And so
that's
we-
exciting.
So actually, yeah, when we're just gonna say, actually, you may know, Jim Selene is
Hey, Jim.
head of this Ethnofest, and we'll be there. We know Jim very well, love him. And we'll be handing out NUG MD cards, and we'll be trying to encourage people to get the medical card, and also just to come to Apothecare
Right,
and, see what we're doing and check out the products.
that's exciting.
It is.
Yes,
It is,
yes.
it is. And then again, we do think that in spite of the fact that there isn't a great impetus right now. I mean, having said that, the state did give some money to both MSU and Michigan. And I think that might be veteran related. So they're running that. We know some people at the VA, there is a dovetailing between veterans and medical applications of cannabis, especially PTSD and other conditions. And so, yeah, we're hopeful that the state will really make a serious effort to pursue this. And we're hopeful that sooner rather than later, they'll be able to start doing real clinical trials.
Right.
And we'll be able to do more. But the bottom line is, Matt is maybe 10 or 15% of our business, but whether people are technically, carrying medical cards or not, and then looking down the road as to how cannabis can help people with serious medical conditions, we want to participate in that. So that's part of our belief as to what we're doing. And we think that our organics is consistent with
Absolutely.
that too.
Yeah. Well, again, it just, for me, it comes down to quality of life. And that looks different for everybody, and you're offering that. And I think that's wonderful.
At least an option.
Yeah. And then everyone should have options.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and then of course, the economics of it is more expensive to do this.
Right.
And that's
Right.
true of almost all organic products too.
Yeah.
So, by the way, just going back to one of my insights, I like those watermelon squares that they put in a plastic box you get at the supermarket.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah, they chop up the watermelon.
Oh,
put
you
the
mean-
squares and can
Oh, okay, pre-cut up fruit,
Yeah.
okay.
pre-cut up fruit.
I gotcha.
So I go into Whole Foods one day, and I grab the watermelon squares and I'm checking it out. It's like $9.
Oh my gosh.
I go, what?
For
Oh,
like.
it's organic, man. So it's certainly true that
Five bites.
organic products cost more. But at least based on our experience, they really do cost more to make too.
They do.
So,
They do, yes, yeah. That's exciting though, and I love that, again, you're bringing options. What's on the horizon for Apothecare? What's next for you?
well, so we actually have a new facility that's under construction.
Really?
That's gonna, more than double our capacity. We have a deep relationship with a company called New Standard.
Mhm.
And New Standard is opening a new store this week in Grand Haven. And so we will be there. Typically, when we go to stores, we bring the band.
Yes.
Sometimes we bring Jim. And so sometimes we bring the traveling circus and stuff. And so.
But you guys put on a good show though, I mean.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you, it's like a 4-piece band. There's keyboard, drums, there's the bass.
Well, I can go
sometimes
anywhere.
the singer.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes we go up to 10 pieces. I mean,
Really?
not so far at the cannabis deals, but yeah,
Wow.
we can have a horn section, multiple singers. So
Okay, I wanna see that.
kind of Motown show
Yeah,
down to
it'd
the
be fun.
jazz thing and everything in between. So, needless to say, it's a very difficult market.
Oh, yes.
And so it's pretty much a 24/7 deal to just kind of keep the lights on and the communications. And then you just think about it, and all of these relationships are your longest, deepest relationships are almost brand new, right?
Right.
And then you're constantly making new relationships. And so you're meeting new people and going into different environments. It's likely that we will also, on the retail side, we will either be partnering or have some more retail stores
Oh, nice.
under our brand, or at least under our management.
Okay.
So we expect that to unfold here, in the next couple of months, and more or less on an ongoing basis.
That's exciting to us.
Yeah, no, it very much is.
Yeah.
We also, let's see, that's going to be, within the next 30 days, we're also going to be doing a collaboration with Higgs.
Oh.
I don't know if you've ever heard of
I
Higgs.
not.
They're a pre-roll branding company, also out of California. They're in Michigan. They have a very cool kind of sleek package and a approach to the pre-rolls. And so they're going to introduce a collaboration with us for organic pre-rolls that will be coming in multi-pack.
Oh, exciting. Okay.
We're kind of working away on solventless processing as well. And we kind of have a vision of lining up our cultivars with our edibles and concentrates. So all of our cultivars will be available, in different modalities, if you will.
Nice.
With different levels of THC.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt. You don't just, so you have your dispensary in Ann Arbor, but your products are in also other dispensaries
Oh, sure.
around the state.
Yeah, about 20 stores.
Nice,
Yeah.
okay.
Again, our flagship partnership is with New Standard, but, and we're certainly looking to collaborate with other stores. That also has been somewhat challenging, given the consolidation
Yes.
that's going on.
Right.
And so we expect that also to be a very volatile situation. It's certainly understandable that if an independent store that we're doing business with is taken over by an MSO or a big vertically integrated company, that they may not believe in organics
Right.
and their approach and the way that we would fit in. So what we do, it does kind of have to fit in, right?
Right.
And so to the degree that other stores, and I think that as time goes on, an independent store with no vertical integration or no relationship with supply is going to probably be rare in the end. And I think that when this whole thing gets sorted out, most retail outlets will have some type of actual business relationship
Right.
with vertical supply. And given that, again, if I'm a big MSO or and I'm making a lot of my own stuff, how does Apothecare fit in? Does that fit in? And then I think also just the kind of communications aspect of it. There's an awful lot of volatility inside cannabis businesses. So these businesses are all new. A lot of times the partners who went in either knew each other under different circumstances or didn't know each other and are finding out, gosh, this marriage isn't working out so good.
Right.
And then with the bigger players, I assume they're like us, but multiplied by a degree of complexity. So even figuring out who to talk to, or how they're making their purchasing decisions, is very difficult. I would just say that in our experience, the only way that it really works out is if there's a close relationship. There's both a critical mass of customers that are interested in whatever that brand is,
Right.
that store, and also there's clear and close communications between the retailer and the supplier. So you're constantly looking at the inventory, you're constantly looking at what's selling, what isn't, how does this fit with the other inventory,
Right.
and so forth. So really, you know, any retail business is actually pretty darn complicated. And what we have now is pretty chaotic. There was no supply chain at all in any way that term is meaningful in other businesses.
Yeah.
And so the whole concept of supply chain and shelf space, differentiation of brands, and all, it's all kind of this great big stew
Mhm.
that's getting sorted out. So having said that, we do feel, I guess maybe we feel a little better or more secure in the sense that at least we know one thing. At least we know what we believe.
Right.
We know what we're doing, and we have a strategy, and we're sticking with that. So as we say, we're going to live or die. We're not going into hydroponics and other things, and so
Right.
this is what we're going to do. And so at least I feel like maybe compared to some others, we have some clarity
Yeah.
with our mission and what we believe in.
Yeah, well, Louis, yeah, definitely. It sounds like you do. You're on the right path, and you and Jack definitely have something that you're working towards a common goal, which is wonderful.
So I mentioned Andrew Black, the head of Certified Kind, and when he came and presented, before he made the comments about no pesticides, no chemical fertilizers, he said, the first thing that this is about is love.
He's not wrong.
And it works better if you take that and you just start with that.
Yeah.
My son's a biologist, and he recently wrote a book. It's not published yet, but there's a number, and I'm not a biologist, but I'm interested. And, and I found out some really crazy things from this. Apparently, we now know that all life, all complex life, in other words, everything other than a single cell organism, is related to the same common ancestor.
Oh, I
It's
believe that.
So apparently for the first 2 billion years, there were only single cell organisms.
Mhm.
And then just a fluke accident, a big cell bumped into a little cell, but they survived. And so somehow the little one penetrated the epidermis of the big one, and they kept going, and they replicated. And that is the basis of nucleic DNA.
Hey, you learn something every day.
And so what does that mean? Well, the big cell benefited by some additional energy
Right,
that the little cell provided. The little cell benefited from the epidermis.
right.
Fast forward, I saw this thing just absolutely mind-blowing about humpback whales. Humpback whales, the superheroes of the sea. Now, and now that biologists have observed this, and just over the last year or so, they figured this out. But these humpbacks will go and save any manner of critter from killer whales.
Oh, really?
There's an example where this pack of killer whales about to eat a seal. In comes, and the humpback whale, by the way, weighs about 60,000 pounds. It's a giant animal.
Yeah, they are.
Not to say that the killer whale isn't a pretty big animal too,
Right.
and ferocious and stuff. And so they're about to eat the seal. In comes the humpback whale, throws the seal up in the air, pivots, does a backflip, catches the seal on its stomach, right? The seal is freaking out and go, well,
What just happened to me?
right, and they're thinking it was bad enough, and now what? And so the seal wants to jump back in the water and get eaten, right?
Right.
And the humpback's going, oh no, buddy, here we go. And just easing them back there, doing the backstroke,
Aw.
so the killer whales can't get at them.
Wow.
So intra-species altruism
Protection.
or empathy.
Yes.
And my son talks about this in his book. These are extreme examples, though, of these animals.
And we think we're the only intelligent life form.
But more than that, behaving in an empathetic or altruistic way. And there's another book by a Dutch author that just came out recently called Humankind, with the emphasis on K-I-N-D.
Right.
And among other things in that book, he points out that in all these wars, like in the American Civil War, it's very important to be able to load your musket and fire quick, right?
Right.
Almost nobody dies from gunshots. almost everybody dies from bombs. You know why? We can't kill each other.
Wow.
We are not programmed to do that. We're used to living in bands of 60 or 70 people, and we need to cooperate. And all life is like that.
Right.
So, and coral and bacteria cooperate, and they have symbiotic relationships and so forth. So the truth of the matter is, it's kind of like fungus. Fungus is all over.
Fungus is a fungus.
And it ties things together, right?
Right.
We need fungus. And so that's how love is too.
Yeah.
Love and empathy and and that's what holds everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you get up in the morning and that's your attitude, just in general,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not to say that we don't have to do the things we have to do. I have to pay the taxes.
Right.
If I'm going to make my payroll, I have to collect I have to do my packages correctly. I have to do all these technical things right. But if I do it with the spirit of getting a good result, and maybe that just means getting a customer a nice product that helps them with their pain, or just makes them feel better. And you know, music is kind of the same thing.
It is. Yeah.
Well,
It is.
you know, I've thought a lot about what music is, and I've come to the conclusion that you can't have music without an audience.
No, you're right.
All you have is practicing.
Yeah.
You're just practicing for yourself.
Right.
But what is music really? Right? It's communicating. It's communicating emotions from one to the other, and it has something to do when you're the musician of getting that back, of getting that feeling back, of getting the love back.
Right.
And
Right.
so it is kind of true that love makes the world go around. And hopefully we're contributing a little bit to that and trying to do it in the right way.
It definitely sounds like you are. You have, you're on the right path and you have a mission, and at the core, it's your customer base. That's what to me anyway, that's what you're conveying.
It really is. The customer
Yeah.
is what it's all about. I've had a lot of people over the years say, "Oh, you're so lucky because you never work for me." I said, that's kind of true. I say more like I'm unemployed, right? You know, that's a little bit of a difference. But it's just silly when they say, "Oh, you never work for anybody." No, you never had a customer.
Right,
I'm
right.
always working for the customer.
Right. Yeah. Now, I met you, gosh, it was about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Why did you decide to become a member of the MiCIA?
Because of you guys.
Oh, thank you.
No, for sure. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, I think MiCIA also resonated from the beginning with the smaller companies, and I know you have relationships with big companies too. I think there's actually an organization that is separate of the big companies, where they're together in some other association. I got 5 or 6 of the great big companies that are together. Their interests are different, I think, than the interests of the independent operators. And I think that this group is particularly good for that, right? For networking and facilitating the relationships. And that, of course, is also tougher, I think, for a smaller company to have compliance officers and all of that. I know that Robin provides a lot of help to members as well.
Yes.
With specific questions that they may have about negotiating
Mhm.
the whole state of Michigan, and that changes almost on a daily basis, right?
It
Including
does.
with the director changing here
Right,
in the
right.
last month or so, and so it's been a really, I just think for all of us, it's been a great thing. So very happy.
Well, we're excited,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have you part of our association
Yeah.
and to collaborate with you. And
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
excited for all of the
Yeah,
endeavors you have coming up.
no, 100%.
Yes, congratulations and
Yeah.
good luck to everything.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, by the way,
Yeah.
coming to Lansing,
Yeah.
and venturing out of Ann Arbor.
I get past the Ann Arbor, actually, yeah, so it's like, that's one thing, this year's travel schedule, it's just complete crazy, but I've literally done all over Michigan.
Mhm. I know, it's been nice with COVID, definitely coming out of it.
So that's an advantage, to get around to see the state, all these different stores and different communities. as much as anything too, each one of these communities and each one of these stores has a personality.
They sure do. They sure do. It's definitely fun to be a part of it and see everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, all right, okay, good deal. Thanks.
All right, well, that's our show for today. For our ancillary shout out, we're gonna cut over to Arnoff Law. Arnoff Law focuses on the business of cannabis. Craig Arnoff works with cannabis entrepreneurs, municipalities, caregivers, and patients on licensing strategy, business planning, industry segmentation, entity formation, real estate acquisitions or tenancy, municipal ordinances, licensing preparation, application packages, and industry advocacy. Arnoff Law understands that the application process can sometimes be overwhelming. They are dedicated to providing you in the language that you can understand with the focus on results. The first step is for them to work with you to come up with a plan to get the results you need. Through their understanding of the law and your understanding of the circumstances, together they will craft a plan to success. So check out Craig Arnoff with Arnoff Law if you're interested in their services. That's our show for today. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Take care.